So today we're talking about wetlands. So you'll want to be writing this in your notebook. Okay, so the wetlands are a really cool place that it doesn't exist in a lot of locations because it has a very specific place where they are created. Pretty much where salt water from the ocean is meeting a freshwater system. So it creates these very special ecosystem and habitats that are very unique to that specific location. Okay, so what are the wetlands? Wetlands are, it's a land area that is going to be covered with a shallow layer of water during some or all of the year. So it's kind of like almost like a punch bowl shape, so it can keep that water in there. And they're going to form in places where the land is below the sea level. So again, it can dip down to allow for that ecosystem to kind of be protected on each side with that water in the middle. And they're going to have a variety of sizes. It really depends on the season. If it's going through a dry season, much of the wetlands can be exposed, the land and the grass. And then if it's a wet season, a lot of it will be covered up in water. So they just kind of grow and change sizes throughout the year depending on the amount of rainfall. Okay, so let's first talk about freshwater wetlands. So these are going to be primarily all freshwater, very, very little amount of salt in the water. So there are three different types of wetlands that we're going to talk about. Let me move myself so you can see what I'm talking about. Okay. The marshes. Marshes are going to have tall grass. It's very characteristic of them, and have water kind of in between those patches of tall grasses. And it will be covered with shallow amount of water. So this is a picture of the marshes. Next one is swamps. So swamps will be more flooded. They'll look like flooded forests is what the book described it as. And they'll be located typically in warmer climates where it's very humid. Think of Louisiana, Florida has a lot of swamps in there. You won't find swamps in the north. And then the one that you do find in the north are the bogs. So bogs is this picture right here. They're going to form, primarily their water comes from the melting of ice sheets. And so these are going to be in cooler climates up north. And their primary characteristic, you'll see everything's covered in moss. So those are the freshwater wetlands. Now to the coastal wetlands. So these are the ones that you would find right on the edges of the coastlines that touch the oceans. So much more salt water involved. Contains both freshwater and salt. So it's a very interesting mixture. Okay, again, this time there's two different kinds we're going to talk about. The salt marshes, again, just like the fresh saltlands, the fresh marshes. Instead of it being freshwater, this is going to have that mixture between the two, so they are different. And they have different ecosystems, but they both have those tall grasses. So anytime you see a tall grass, you know it's a marsh. And then mangrove forests, which are my favorite. They are covered with mangrove trees. And so these are the trees. They look like they're growing out of the water. Those root systems are all sorts of tangled. They're really kind of creepy and weird looking, and I love them. But they go all the way down to the bottom of the water source, that river. It's not really a riverbed, but that coastal area. So those roots go all the way down to the bottom. Very cool. You will see mangrove forests in the United States, primarily Florida. That's where a lot of them are. Okay, so let's talk next about why they're important to us or to this planet. So first, let's focus on plants. So wetlands are helpful to plants because first off, plants grow in a huge abundant variety in the wetlands, covered in plants. One of the reasons why they grow so well there is because they're sheltered. If you remember, I told you that it's like a punch bowl. So if it's a punch bowl, then anything that grows in the center of that is protected. There's not a lot of fast flowing water. No rivers here at all, barely a stream. So it's very calm. But at the same time, because it has that rich ecosystem of the salt and the fresh, that unique blend of it, that water and soil is very nutrient rich. Lots of good stuff in there because it can't get refreshed. So it just stays there and it will accumulate over time. So a lot of really cool plants there. Okay, so for animals, one of the reasons it's so good for animals there, there's a lot of insects and fish. And those are smaller guys, right? So that's what the larger animals are going to come after. And that's exactly what happens. This is going to bring in larger animals, things like birds, amphibians, reptiles. There are mammals that live there too. I just didn't mention it. Migratory birds and animals as well, particularly birds, they like to come here. So on their way south, they will either stay there in the wetland for the winter time, or they will stop there to stock up on their food before heading more south. And then last, why are they important to us? So in the 1970s, we passed a law to protect the wetlands, which was really a good thing to do because they are very beneficial to us. Some of the ways that they help. First off, they're natural filters. They will collect and absorb the pollutants that are on the land from getting out into the water and the oceans. I know that sounds awful because you're like, but now you're polluting the wetlands. That's not good. I mean, pollution is bad in any way, but we really, really don't want our bad stuff to get into the water, into the oceans. That's just bad. The oceans need to be protected. They are a very fragile entity, and since they cover 70% of our land, of our planet, we need to protect them. So that's a good thing, and that's what this picture shows. It will collect it right there. It also stabilizes the land. Remember that I told you that root systems will anchor land in place, and that's what happens here. So these wetlands will reduce flooding from going up onto land, and also will stabilize the land from eroding into the ocean or whatever water source it's at. So that's very good. Also, wetlands will keep temperatures moderate because it's a almost year-long amount of having water in a place. Water is a great temperature moderator, so it will keep it at decent temps, and also you got plenty of water, and so that's really good for agriculture. So we do grow some different foods there on wetlands. The most common one is cranberries, so that's what this picture is. Cranberry fields are all in marshes. And that is all you need to know about the wetlands.